This is another great birth story episode brought to you by Lancino. Welcome to the All About Pregnancy and Birth podcast. I'm Dr. Nicole Calloway Rankins, a board-certified OBGYN who's been in practice for nearly 15 years. I've had the privilege of helping over 1,000 babies into this world, and I'm here to help you be calm, confident, and empowered to have a beautiful pregnancy and birth. Quick note, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice. Check out the full disclaimer at drnicolerankins.com/disclaimer. Now let's get to it. Hey, real quick, before we get into this episode, my new and improved online birth course, the Birth with Power Pathway, is coming in May. If you want to feel calm, confident, and actually prepared for your hospital birth, this is for you. The best way to be the first to know when it drops, join my email list at drnicolerankins.com/email. Well, hello. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. This is episode number 161. Thank you for being here with me today. So in today's episode, we have a birth story from Molly. Molly is a higher education administrator in the New York area. She's wife to Jason and mom to Juniper. I love that name, Juniper. Molly hopes that by sharing her birth story, she will empower other women to advocate for themselves and make informed choices with their providers, and also talk about the importance of having a partner who can advocate for you as well. Now, although Molly is highly educated, she has a PhD, she did a lot of research, including listening to my podcast, other podcasts, reading books. She really wasn't prepared for how things went with her birth, and she felt a little bit blindsided. Her doctor was very nice, and she felt like she had a good relationship with her. She assured Molly that she would look out for her best interest, but unfortunately, that is not what ultimately happened. Molly ended up having an induction. She was denied an epidural. She was denied the ability to get up and move around despite having an uncomplicated pregnancy. And the whole experience was traumatic for her, and in fact left her feeling like the folks in the hospital were not treating her like a human being. And she does not want that to happen to anyone else. Hence why she is sharing her birth story today. So you're definitely going to want to listen in. Now, before we get into the episode, I want to say a quick word about the episode sponsor, Lancino. When I was a breastfeeding mom, I actually used Lancino breastfeeding products myself. I loved their milk storage bags, and it is so delightful to work with them now, especially to talk about their postpartum birth prep and recovery line. This line is absolutely fantastic. And it includes products like an upside down postpartum wash bottle. It's much nicer than the one you get in the hospital. There are postpartum herbal sprays, postpartum pain relief sprays, there are bath products. My favorite are the hot and cold therapy packs that you can either put in the microwave or in the freezer, and they turn different colors, whether or not they're hot or they are cold. All of the products are great. I have put my hands on every single one of them, and they are truly fantastic. I highly encourage you to check them out. You can learn more about the products at lancino.com/AAPB. That's Lancino, LANSINOH.com/AAPB. All right, let's get into the birth story episode with Molly. Molly, thank you so much for agreeing to come onto the podcast. I really appreciate you coming on to share your birth story.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I listened to you all throughout my pregnancy and really, trusted the information I got from you and counted on it. So I'm really honored to be here.
Thank you. So why don't we start off by having you tell us a bit about yourself and your family?
Sure. So, my name is Molly. I live in New York with my husband and my daughter Juniper. She's 4.5 months old now, and I'm a higher education administrator.
Nice. And the name Juniper is so adorable. I absolutely love
Oh, thank you.
it. So, why don't we get straight into it? In order to understand your birth story, we first have to understand a bit about your pregnancy and prenatal care. So, what was your pregnancy and prenatal care like?
So I felt really lucky with my pregnancy. I had a very uncomplicated pregnancy, except for some really, some pretty bad morning sickness at the beginning, which thankfully resolved after 12 weeks. It was a really easy pregnancy, and I'm grateful for that.
Good, 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 good. And what about your prenatal care? What was your prenatal care like?
So overall, I think my prenatal care was great. I had the doctor that I found. She and I had a really, I really enjoyed working with her. I felt like she was taking, good care of us. The one thing that, now in retrospect, I feel like maybe I should have looked at more carefully was that when I asked about, a birth plan or like doing some kind of childbirth preparation,
Mm-hmm.
her advice was that, that doing like a childbirth course would make me overthink the process. She
Mm,
was like, she's like, I don't recommend a birth plan. You really should just go with the flow. Your doctors are here to take care of you. And so just kind of like trust us and go with it. And at the time, I'm somebody who's really like type A. I like to be organized.
mm-hmm.
I have a PhD, so I do a lot of research about everything.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time I kind of appreciated that because I did want to trust my providers.
Sure.
I didn't want to micromanage the process or
Right.
feel like I had to be in control of every moment. I felt actually found it comforting that she was like, I got this. You can just kind of relax into it. But I have to say now in retrospect, I wish that I had asked some more questions around that. Because once I got into my labor and childbirth, I didn't feel like I was prepared for things not to go the way that I
Gotcha.
wanted them
Yeah, and
to.
we'll get into all of that. So I definitely appreciate you bringing that up. Other than that, did you have any concerns or issues during your prenatal care, especially around COVID? How was that?
Well, so it was difficult because my husband couldn't come to my prenatal appointments
Mm-hmm.
with me. We did FaceTime when they were doing like the ultrasounds, so he could see. But I just went kind of by myself, and I realized if not for COVID, he would have been able to come with me, and he would have been much more informed and prepared. When we did get to the hospital together,
Yeah.
even though I shared everything with him, and he was reading and trying to be as educated as he could be.
Yeah.
So that part wasn't great, but we understand in COVID, you have to kind of just deal with that part of it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I certainly didn't realize at first how big of an impact that has been for folks not to be able to have people with them during their prenatal visits. It really does make a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what did you do to prepare for your birth? You sound like a woman after my own heart, type A, and
Well, I listen to your podcast a lot. um, yeah, and I went through your website, and you have some great resources there as well. I read a lot of books, listened to some other podcasts. Really, just did everything I could to educate myself. As I said, I asked my doctor about a childbirth course, and she didn't recommend it, so I didn't pursue that.
Sure.
But I really tried to learn everything I could on my own.
Okay. Okay. And then what are some things that you wanted for your birth?
So I was, and that was part of why I found it comforting that she was like, just kind of like go with the flow and trust me on this, because I wasn't really sure what I wanted. I only had a few friends who've gone through, labor and childbirth, who could share their experiences with me. I don't have any sisters, so I couldn't, talk to people in my family really. And I feel like during my pregnancy, I ran the gamut from wanting like a home birth to like, I want to be in the hospital with drugs, like, and I want to make sure that doctors are there if anything goes wrong.
Right.
So it was really kind of a searching process for me. And, at the end, I definitely, especially with COVID, I was like, I would feel more comfortable being in a hospital, being with, making sure my doctor is there and that there's neonatal care, that if
Mm-hmm.
God forbid anything should go wrong in that way. Um, and I kind of, I talked to my doctor about things like doing skin to skin, delayed cord clamping, uh, and, uh, and things like that. And I didn't think too much to ask about, uh, I was focused on the baby and like making sure the baby is taken care of in the way that I wanted
Right.
once she was born. I didn't think to ask too much about my own experience.
Mm,
And, something like, will I be able to get up and move around? I kind of
right.
took that for granted and didn't really ask about that going into it.
Gotcha. 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 Let's talk about something most pregnant women aren't getting enough of: omega-3 DHA. The recommendation is over 200 milligrams a day, but less than 5% of pregnant women in the US meet that. That's one of the reasons I love Ritual's Essential Prenatal. It has 350 milligrams of vegan DHA plus other key nutrients like methylated folate and choline to support baby's neural tube development. As an OBGYN, I appreciate that Ritual goes beyond the basics. The formula is science backed, third party tested for heavy metals and microbes, and every ingredient is traceable. And the delayed release design, it's gentle on the stomach, something that really matters, especially if there's trouble with nausea during pregnancy. You deserve to know exactly what you're putting into your body, especially when it comes to prenatal multivitamins. And with Ritual's dedication to traceable science and sourcing, you always will. See for yourself with 25% off your first month at ritual.com/Dr. Nicole. Start Ritual or add Essential Prenatal to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/Dr. Nicole for 25% off your first month. And so let's talk about them. What was your labor and birth like? Let's go through the details.
Okay, sure. So I had a scheduled induction, which was my doctor's recommendation. I was 40 weeks and 1 day when I went in for an induction. And
Mm-hmm.
now that I've kind of talked to people about this and I've read about it, I realize that that's not typical. That usually they will, induce after you've, at like 41 weeks or 42 weeks, not right at 40 weeks. Um,
And what was her reasoning for wanting to recommend the induction?
Oh, Nicole, you're gonna laugh at this, but she was going away the next weekend.
And you know what? It's it's unfortunate, but like if it's a situation where it's like, hey, this is where I am, and I really want to be there for the birth, and if you
Yeah,
want me to be there, and that's totally fine. But
yeah,
sometimes, and as we'll get into, maybe they might not always be there the whole time. But sometimes that comes from, and I don't know her particular situation, it actually comes from the way that we get a lack of a way for saying it, credit or reimbursed, really paid for the work you have to try to deliver your own patients. It can be really complicated. So I'm not, talking about her own situation, but I can see how that may have been like, okay, you're going out of town. Like, how did you think when she said that?
I mean, I was thinking along the same lines. I mean, I understand, like, if you're an OB and you have all these patients that you want to see through to their births, you can't just be on call all the time.
Hmm.
It made sense. And she said that, it was because she wanted to be there at the birth with me, and I would have felt much more comfortable having her there as well. And it ended up that she ended up not being there because my labor went so long that, it was like in the middle of the night and she wasn't there anyway. But I kind of, again, going along with, she asked me to trust her, and I did.
Hmm.
Up until that point, I had no reason not to.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
but we didn't discuss, kind of all of the other things that go along with an induction. I knew from partly from listening to your podcast and partly from kind of reading about it that, I think it's the Pitocin can
Uh-huh.
cause more intense contractions than
Hmm.
maybe otherwise. So I was
Yep.
prepared for that part. She mentioned that an induction can also take a long time. She mentioned it could be like 24 hours. But I thought like, when I pictured that, like taking a long time, I thought it would be like, taking a long time for things to get started. I didn't realize it would be like 48 hours of actually having contractions.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I just I wish that I had had more of a conversation with her about what really it means to have an induction.
Right, right, right. And then were you dilated at all when you went in or?
No, nothing.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was scheduled for 4 o'clock on a Sunday.
Mhm.
We checked in, got in our room, and the drugs started kicking in around 9 o'clock that night. So it was like 5 hours of kind of waiting around, and
Mhm.
that's when I started feeling contractions. And part of the real challenge was that I started feeling the contractions right away, and they were super super intense. Um, I should mention also, because this I think contributed to my mindset, but when we were checking into the hospital, I there was like a woman screaming down the hallway that you could hear,
Right.
and that was just like, I was like, oh my
What
gosh, what
what
am I
the
in
what
for?
is going on? Yes,
Yeah,
like what have I signed up for?
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, but so around 9 o'clock, I started to feel really, really intense contractions, and I had Juniper was what they've told me is called a sunny side up baby. So
Mhm.
I was in back labor. So I feel like before I went into labor, people told me, 50 different things of what a contraction feels like. Some people told me it feels like your stomach tightening. Some people told me it feels like menstrual cramps. For me, it was like really, really intense back pain.
Mm. And it's one of those things like you can't, you can be prepared, but you you really don't know what it's like until you get into
Yeah.
it. I mean, I'm an obstetrician, and even when I had children, I was like, I don't know what a contraction feels like. But then when you feel it, it's like, okay, this is something that's happening,
Yeah.
and I feel it. Yes, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And for me, I don't know what other folks' experiences were like, but for me, once it really started in earnest, it was bad enough that I couldn't speak. Like the pain was
mm,
that intense. But I wasn't dilated at all. And my plan was, and I had mentioned this to my doctor beforehand, like I wanted to have an epidural. I wasn't trying to do a medication free
uh-huh,
labor.
sure.
But she did not want to give me the epidural until I was more dilated. So I was like at 3 centimeters for a long, long, long time
Without an epidural.
without an epidural.
And
Um,
what were they sa I'm sorry. I'm trying not to get, like,
no,
upset, but we really that shouldn't happen, it should happen whenever, folks want it to happen. What were they giving you for pain medicine in the meantime?
So yeah, so I mean, so before I even started to ask for the pain medicine, like I just had this. I mean, I was in back labor, right? So the most
Mhm.
painful place for me to be was lying on my back,
Right.
and I don't know why. Nobody explained this to me, but even though I asked about it, but I was hooked up to like all of these monitors, like all of the wires,
Right.
even though I had had an uncomplicated pregnancy.
Right.
Um, And the nurse, every time I tried to, like, not even try to get up, like, even try to turn over onto my side where it was a little bit more comfortable, a nurse would come in and say, oh, you disconnected the monitor. You have to stay on your back. Um, so I was like desperate to just get up and walk around, and I thought that would help the dilation too if I was able to move
Sure.
around,
Sure.
even just to get off my back because I was in so much pain on my back.
Right.
And at one point, a nurse came in and offered me an enema to help with the dilation, and I was like, no, no, no.
No.
I'm uncomfortable enough already. I don't.
Right.
That doesn't feel like something that's going to be helpful to me right now. Um, and the contractions also were like, I expected contractions to have like a break in between where I could catch my breath,
Mhm.
and I feel like almost right away were like just back to back contractions. I didn't
Right.
have much of any pause in between. Um, but still wasn't making any progress with dilation. So
I'm sorry.
I,
How are you feeling during that time? Because I feel like I can hear it in your voice that it it was maybe traumatic?
It definitely was traumatic, and I have to say, I'll talk about this towards the end, but there was
Hmm.
one nurse, exactly one nurse who I felt treated me like a human being. And I actually wrote to the hospital after we came home to like just mention her by name and say that how wonderful she was and
Right.
how much of an exception she was because, just to be in pain and to have the nurses, seem to not really care about that and just, only care about whether the monitors were hooked up correctly.
Right.
Um, and it felt like such a sharp difference from um, prenatal care, where I feel like there's much more, um, more concern about the mother. Like, how are you
Hmm.
feeling? Are you eating?
Hmm.
How's your nutrition? How are you
Hmm.
comfortable? And then to be in labor and just, it was just like, they were monitoring the baby's heartbeat, which don't get me wrong, I'm glad. But there was very little concern for my experience and what I was feeling and whether I was in pain or not.
Right. 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 So you were at 3 centimeters, you said, for a while. Were they giving you IV pain medication or anything?
So I started being that woman screaming in the hallway. I wasn't screaming in the hallway, but I was
Right.
screaming and I'm sure people heard it. I mean, the pain was so, so, so intense. And so finally I said, if you're not going to give me an epidural, can you please give me something? I think my husband, at that point, I really started to kind of lose, I couldn't speak. I was kind of in and out because I was in so much pain. And my husband, helped to advocate for me and asked for some kind of pain medication for me. So I got IV pain medication. I don't know what it was, but I have to tell you, it made me hallucinate
Mhm.
so badly. I mean,
Oh,
I I really like I've never done like serious drugs, but that's what
right.
I imagine it's like. I actually hallucinated two nurses like coming into the room and talking about stealing all the babies and I kid you not, it was like serious, serious hallucinations. Um,
Oh,
and my husband told me like I was saying all these crazy things because I was really, really, really out of it. And I also started sweating. I mean, I was drenched in sweat and he was trying to ask the nurses, like, is she okay? What's going on? Because I was just drenched in sweat. And he couldn't get any of the nurses to like come help. My husband took his t-shirt off, went to the ice machine and filled his t-shirt with ice chips to like cool me down.
right. Oh my God.
Yeah. So that part and that helped with the pain a little bit. I was still feeling the contractions. They were less intense, but I had already felt kind of disconnected from my body because the pain was so intense and I didn't have
Mhm.
control over how I was moving or what my experience was. But then having those intense hallucinations, I felt it started to feel like a complete like out of body experience. It got really weird.
Right, right. So how long was it then before you could get like, at what point like, how long did you have to go through this before you could get an epidural?
Yeah. So I'm not sure, like I wasn't really aware of the time at that point, but it was about 24 hours later that
I'm sorry. 24?
yeah, so we'd been 24 hours since I had gotten the Pitocin to start the induction. Um that had all been going on for 24 hours and then after that pain medication, whatever it was that made me hallucinate like crazy, started to wear off, then my doctor said she would give me the epidural. And by that point, I was like, I mean, I'd gone through it. Like I was drenched in sweat and I was shaking uncontrollably. And my husband said that because he was holding me while I was getting the epidural, he said that was the scariest moment for him because, they're putting a needle in my spine and I couldn't stop shaking. They were trying to tell me to hold still. And I was really worried. I was just going to my whole body was going to jerk and like the
Right.
needle would slip.
And you were
Um,
probably exhausted by that.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally exhausted. We both were because he wasn't
Sure.
getting any sleep either. Um, so I got the epidural, and once I got the epidural, it was such a huge relief. The pain went away. It was a good epidural. I know a lot of people, the epidural doesn't work the first time. I heard your story about an ineffective epidural, and I'm really sorry
Hmm.
that you went through that. But fortunately, the epidural, it worked fine. But it did make me vomit, and I was on my back, right? I wasn't allowed to be anywhere but on my back.
Right.
And I was really scared because I was throwing up and I couldn't turn myself over. That like I was just completely numb from the waist down. So my husband, again, through our second night there in the hospital, stayed awake by my bedside and, held the barf bag so I could, I wouldn't choke, because the nurses were
Right.
like not coming in and just not that helpful. So that's my new definition of love now. Like, you date
Seriously.
somebody
Yeah.
and, you get married, but it's not until somebody has to like keep you from choking on your own barf that,
Yes.
you
Oh
feel
my
love.
God. And then by this point, was your doctor gone? Like, had she left or was she
She
still?
she came in a couple of times to do a cervical check, which I also wasn't prepared for how painful that is when you are having contractions.
Hmm.
Once I got the epidural, I started dilating really fast. And she was like, "Oh, it's probably because you're relaxed now that you're not in pain."
And you're like, well, maybe if you would have given me the blank, blank
Exactly.
epidural however many hours ago.
Exactly. You told me I couldn't have the epidural because I wasn't dilated. So it doesn't make sense. Um, but once I got the epidural, things progressed really fast. And then that was when this Nurse Jackie, oh my gosh, I will love her for the rest of my life. She came in and helped me like turn on my side I think it was like every half hour, maybe every hour.
Uh-huh.
Um, and she was amazing. Like, she got me a peanut ball to, help my hips open up, and she just made sure I was comfortable. And thankfully, she was the nurse on duty when I actually started to be ready to push. So she coached me through pushing as well. And I'm so grateful for her because she was like the one person who kept it from being a completely horrible experience. She was the first person who made me feel like I was a human being and being cared for. And to me,
So,
yeah, sorry.
so you had been there for well over a day at this
Yeah.
point, and it wasn't until at the very end that you had somebody who finally came in and like you said, treated you like a human being. That just breaks my heart.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And it really, I mean, having her be there showed me how different that the experience can be when you have somebody who, is kind of in your corner and taking care of you. I'm so glad she was there while I was pushing because that was the best part of the whole experience. I know most women probably can't say that, but like, the pushing was really easy. She coached me through it. Everybody who was there at the actual delivery was just really kind and amazing. And, that was the best part of my whole birthing experience.
Awesome. So how long did you push for?
10 minutes.
Oh, snap. Like that,
I mean,
that was
once I got that epidural, things
Yeah.
happened fast. Like I dilated
Right.
and like that baby was ready to come out.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. And then at what point, so you said your doctor came in a couple times to check you. So when
Yeah.
did she leave and when did someone else take over?
I'm not sure because actually the last person to check me and be like, okay, you're 10 centimeters was Nurse Jackie. She did that final
Okay.
check. And
Okay.
my doctor must have been gone by that point because the person who did the delivery was the hospitalist.
Gotcha. 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 And you felt like the hospitalist hopefully treated you
Yeah, yeah,
well. Okay.
everybody there, the nurses, just like that was a great team.
Right.
That was the best part.
So, you know what? I don't, and I please don't. If you don't want to answer anything, I don't
Mhm.
want to make this any more traumatic than it
Yeah.
was. But your doctor scheduled you for this induction, and then like didn't say, I'm sorry, I can't stay, or I have to leave, or you're in good hands, or anything like that before.
No, I mean, honestly, that especially after like I got those drugs and, I feel like it's possible that she came in at some point and I was just
Uh
like in my
huh.
own little world of
Sure.
pain and
Okay.
wasn't aware of it, but
Fair enough.
yeah,
Okay.
I don't remember that.
Okay. 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 So then after Juniper was born, did you get skin to skin contact
We
and
did,
all of
yeah.
those things? Okay. Okay.
And actually, again, Nurse Jackie, like she coached me through everything. She through pushing and delivery to like the skin to skin and latching. She got me a sandwich, which was like I hadn't eaten in a day. She was the best. She helped me get cleaned up. And then we had some time to be skin to skin, and before Juniper went to the nursery, and my husband and I went to the room where we were going to stay for the next couple of days.
Okay. Okay. So wait, she actually went to the nursery?
Yeah, they took her to like weigh her and check her out and all that stuff. So
Interesting. Okay.
yeah,
A lot of times especially during COVID, that stuff is done in the room now. So
really,
yeah, we try to
yeah,
keep moms and babies in the room and not out of the nursery. So just interesting that they took her to the nurse. I mean, I guess every hospital is a little bit different, obviously, as
yeah.
you now know. But okay, so then what was the postpartum period like for you?
Hard, really hard. So I was thankfully prepared for breastfeeding to be difficult,
Hmm.
because I had enough, friends and family members tell me like that they had some struggles with it at the beginning. And I, you know, I heard through your podcast that some women having difficulty with that. So I was prepared for it to be challenging. But it was really tough. She didn't latch. I think now that I know a little bit more about things, I feel like she may have a lip tie that didn't go, that wasn't diagnosed. And that might have been why she didn't latch on very well. Cause like her top lip doesn't really flange out. That was a challenge. And she also, we didn't find this out in the hospital. It was only afterwards with her pediatrician, but she had a milk and soy protein allergy.
Hmm.
I didn't know that. I was, having milk in my coffee, like I was just going hard on the milk and
Sure,
stuff.
sure. I mean, how could you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was part of the challenge too, is that even what she was getting, she wasn't able to metabolize. So she was dropping weight and, very, very, crying a lot, inconsolable. There was some blood in her diapers in the hospital that, they were like, oh, that's normal. And again, it was just, I felt like there was a lot of care or interventions that could have happened that would have made that experience better. That just didn't happen.
Right.
Yeah.
And then even after you got home, how were things? How soon did they get better or how long were they difficult?
Well, fortunately, we had a really good pediatrician who diagnosed her allergy right away. So I changed my diet and that went a lot better. We still had issues with latching, but I saw a lactation consultant who told me about it, that it was an option to just pump exclusively. I started pumping because she was having difficulty latching, and I knew enough that I needed to stimulate my milk supply to make sure that it came in.
Mhm.
But once we had to give her a little bit of formula because she had dropped so much weight because of her allergy, and then I think she just got more comfortable with the bottle than the breast, although she never really latched very well. And so, I was like, I don't know, I'm pumping and I'm giving her breast milk in a bottle, and this seems to be working, but is there
Mhm.
something wrong about this? Like, should I be trying harder to get her to latch? And I'm really grateful for that lactation consultant who said, your, your baby is fed. That's the most important thing. She's getting breast milk, which is great. And if that's how it works for you, that's how it works.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so that gave me the kind of freedom to just kind of pursue that. And that's what we've been doing ever since. And it's been great.
Okay, good. Great, great, great. And then did you have any trouble with depression or anxiety or anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. So I've had some difficulties healing postpartum. So I had a second degree tear,
Mhm.
and had some, and when I went to my 6 week appointment, first of all, that the tear hadn't healed yet. And I had been having a lot of anxiety just about, you know, like, do I know what I'm doing?
Yeah.
All of these things that, I wasn't prepared for. It's a huge learning curve to have a newborn. And it's
Mm-hmm.
also really, really difficult to recover from a very significant physical experience, which is
Mm-hmm.
childbirth, especially after, a labor that was like 2 days long,
Yeah.
and not getting enough sleep. So, I had a lot of anxiety that I think in retrospect was related to sleep deprivation. Um, I also, I started talking to somebody about uh, what I didn't even realize was a thing, but postpartum OCD, which is related to postpartum anxiety
Mm-hmm.
and postpartum depression, where like I would just worry so much about, our because we were feeding her with bottles, like, are the bottles clean enough? I'm anxious about something happening to her.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot of anxiety. And coupled that with the physical recovery, it was really, really hard. So when I went to my 6-week appointment, my doctor asked one question about my mood, and she said, you don't have postpartum depression, do you?" Um, and I just like,
Oh,
that's not a question that really invites an answer. I got the sense that this was like a screening she had to do, and she wasn't really willing to engage.
right.
And I was like, no, no, of course I don't. Right. But I actually, I had joined a virtual lactation support group because of our issues, kind of figuring out latching and
Uh-huh.
all that. And somebody came as a guest to that group who was a therapist who specializes in postpartum issues. And she kind of gave this talk about postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, and postpartum OCD. And when she was talking about postpartum OCD, my husband was in the room and heard her. And he was like, that sounds exactly like
Mm,
you. That sounds exactly like what you've been going through. So things like just, because we were bottle feeding her, I would be so worried about getting the bottle sterilized, um, and just I would be really afraid of, like, hurting her accidentally,
mm-hmm.
or just like to the point where it was debilitating. That to the point where I was like, I felt more comfortable with my husband holding her than me, because I was so afraid I was going to do something
Gotcha.
wrong. Um, and so, yeah, so I reached out to that therapist and started working with her, and that's been really great. I think, things got better on their own. Once I hit the 3-month mark, for some reason, like, things just got easier. I think it's because she was starting to hold her head up more, and she felt like a little more kind of sturdy, and I didn't feel like I was gonna, accidentally hurt her so much if I held her the
Right.
wrong way. Um, but also, I'm sure there's a hormonal part to it. I just, started feeling more comfortable, a little bit more confident. And kind of like I was, it really felt like coming out of a
Sure.
fog once I
Sure.
hit that 3-month
Sure.
mark.
And then was this, well, a couple questions. Do
Yeah,
you think you would have recognized it if your husband hadn't noticed?
probably not. Because I'm more the type of person to just, like, kind of white knuckle it,
Uh-huh.
just like deal with what's in front of me, get through the
Right.
day and keep
Yeah.
going. And, I also was a little bit, um, afraid to acknowledge that I was struggling, because I thought that made me a bad mom,
Sure.
which was like my biggest fear to begin with.
Sure.
I also think COVID had to do with it, because our the hospital and our pediatrician uh, told us not to have any visitors for the first 8 weeks, to kind of protect her from COVID,
Mhm.
which meant that we didn't have any support, really. It was just me and my husband trying to figure this out.
Right.
And neither one, we'd both gone through this experience in the hospital. We started out already sleep deprived, and, we were really just figuring it out on our own. And that felt very isolating.
Sure.
So that kind of compounded things too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And plus you're a accomplished person. You're probably maybe I'm projecting, but to some degree it's like I can do this. Like I can
No,
yeah.
definitely, definitely. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and in fact, in that lactation group that I'm in, the lactation counselor who leads it was like, it's really hard for women who, like, you've gotten to a point in your career where you feel capable, and then, you have this tiny person who is just like throws you for a loop, and, it's the most important thing in the world to you. And it's also the most difficult.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
it's tough.
Yeah. And was this a free group or is this something?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really grateful for this. It's through the hospital network in my area. It's called the Baby Cafe. And it's just a free group that you can join virtually once a week. And it was the best thing by far that I did during that period, because not only did I learn a lot just about, pumping, which I didn't, I'd done my homework before giving birth about breastfeeding and stuff. And I feel like I read about, you can breastfeed or you can give formula. And I didn't know that there were any other options.
Right.
That, you could pump, you can supplement with formula and still breastfeed. Like, there are all these other things that you can do to make it work for you and your baby. So I learned a lot of information, but also got to meet other new
Right.
moms who are going through the same thing that I was. So
Sure.
that was by far the highlight of my postpartum.
Gotcha. And was it like a Facebook group or?
It's well, they do have a Facebook group, but they meet through Teams.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, did you go back to work at some point during this time?
I did. Yeah, I went back to work at 2.5 months, which was I felt like was too early. But I leave in this country is not the best.
It's
so
awful.
It had
Actually,
to happen.
it's terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really grateful with my job. They have allowed me to work remotely a lot. I only have to go in a few times. So I've been able to be home and working. So, and that was a difficult transition. Although I have to say, in some ways, I kind of appreciated that, especially, especially because I think it would have been harder if I had to commute, but I'd been stuck in the house for 2.5 months, and, it was really nice to start to, talk to people again and think about things that had nothing to do with having a baby. So that was really good.
Nice. And then you mentioned that you wrote back to the hospital. Was that to share about your entire experience, or did you just want to point out how great Jackie was, or what prompted you to do that?
Yeah, I really just wanted to kind of give a shout out to Nurse Jackie. I just, like I said, she was the highlight of the care she gave, was the highlight of my experience at the hospital. I didn't write about all of the other stuff that went on, but I really just wanted to say that she was really awesome. I gave some examples of how wonderful the care she gave was, and I hope they shared that with her, and I hope she knows that she's appreciated.
Yeah. Usually we do get the one, if that makes it in through the hospital. They typically will give that feedback to folks. So she probably did get it. So how are you feeling about your experience?
So I mean, frustrated, honestly. I feel like I went in to my labor and delivery and postpartum kind of I not knowing a lot, and despite the fact that I had really tried to educate myself a lot. And I think the reason that all of these things that I ended up dealing with, like postpartum mood, even the like that you can have difficulties healing from labor. I've never heard anybody talk about that before. And so when that started happening for me, it just felt like I was like, how is this even possible? And all of the other stuff that happened, I feel like the reason that I wasn't more informed or wasn't more prepared is that it's just, people don't talk about these things a lot. You have a baby shower, and everybody talks about the great parts of having a kid, and there are wonderful, it's so wonderful to have a baby, and they're so cute, and all of that is wonderful. But I wish that there was more conversation about the mother's experience. And that's hard. I mean, um, I have friends who are pregnant now, and I'm not sure, like, I don't want to like dump on them and like get in their head and tell them it's like really scary, and terrible, because that's not helpful either. But I do hope that people can start to have some more frank and real conversations about, the challenges of, labor and postpartum, and how to really support mothers.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. It's so important that we talk about all of the realities that can happen, so the full spectrum of experience is normalized and people don't feel alone, and they know where they can get help if they need it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So, have you thought about talking to your doctor about your experience at all?
You know, I have thought about that. I've also thought about, just changing providers at this point,
Mhm.
but like that's a little bit scary too, because it's just it's kind of overwhelming to like start over with somebody
Sure.
once you built a relationship with someone. Um, I I've I so I'm still working with her because, as I mentioned, I'm probably going to have this surgical procedure to deal with the tear.
Mhm.
Um, and I've started to realize that when I when I really kind of push a little bit harder and ask more questions, then
Mhm.
she will kind of take a moment and explain things to me. But, um, I need to know to ask the questions. Otherwise she just kind of, because it's what she does every day. Like, this is her job. And so
Mhm.
she has this level of knowledge and maybe kind of assumes that other people do as well. So she doesn't kind of let me in into her, her thinking and her judgment on things, and just kind of wants me to go along with it. Um, but she's open to my asking questions if I know what the right questions are. I think that is problematic though, because if you don't know what questions to ask, then you don't get the answers that you need.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
And if I mean, like I said, I'm somebody who really, I researched the heck out of everything, and I really tried to educate myself, so I do know what those questions are. And I feel like if I don't feel prepared to know what to ask, then, which I mean, I didn't go to medical school, so it makes sense that I wouldn't know that.
Right.
And so I think a lot of people are in that situation where, you know, it, I do think that people should have trust in their medical providers, because it's an intensive training and a level of knowledge that most people don't have. But, um, they're also, you do need to advocate for yourself to some degree, and um, be able to say when things are not going well for you, and hope that there'll be some responsiveness to that.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So then what is the one piece of advice that you definitely want to share with other women as they get ready for their birth?
Yeah, I would say just, to be patient with yourself, and with the process. Well, also, of course, advocating for yourself and all of that. But, as I was saying before about the difficulties of postpartum, like, the messaging we get is that, if you have your nursery all set up and you do all of this, nesting, you'll be able to kind of control your experience. But I mean, I found that for me, there was so much that was out of my control, with both my labor and postpartum, and that was the hardest part for me. Is like not even just going through it physically, but feeling like I was not in control of things. And
Mhm.
definitely, if I had a better relationship with my care providers, and if the nursing staff had been more responsive, like, all of those things should have happened. And those are, I think, structural issues. And I'm not saying that any of that was okay, or that anybody should kind of put up with that. But, you know, I think it would have helped me a lot to just give myself the space to be like, this sucks. I feel completely out of control. I
Mm-hmm.
have no control over what's happening with my body. I'm trying to learn how to take care of this tiny human being. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a big learning curve, and this is hard. It's okay not to be okay all of the time and be on top of things all of the time. So I think once that happened for me, once I acknowledged that, this has been really difficult and I'm struggling and I need some more help, that kind of opens you up to get the support that you need. And that really goes a long way in helping ease that transition into being a mom.
Definitely, definitely. Excellent advice. So, where can people connect with you? You can say nowhere if you want to, but
No, I would love to connect to, especially new moms, anybody who wants to talk more about any of the things I mentioned today. The best place to reach me is Instagram. I'm at molly.lotz, LOTZ.
Okay, perfect. And we will link that in the show notes. Well, thank you so much, Molly, for coming on to the podcast. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all of the things, the good, the bad, the ugly with your story. And it's going to help some people for sure. 100%. I know it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was great.
So that was a bit of a difficult birth story episode, and I really appreciate Molly coming on and sharing her story to help others learn and not have the same experience. Now, after every episode where I have a guest on, I do something called Dr. Nicole's Notes, where I talk about my top 3 or 4 takeaways from the episode. So here are my Dr. Nicole's notes from my conversation with Molly. But real quick, before we do that, I got to talk about the episode sponsor again. It's Lancino. And I definitely want you to check out the products in their birth prep and recovery line. These products really, really, really are amazing. And I'm not saying that just because they're a sponsor of the episode. I'm saying that because I have actually touched and held the products and they are fantastic. They include an upside down postpartum wash bottle, postpartum sprays for herbal relief, postpartum sprays for pain relief, my favorite, the hot and cold therapy packs, and more. You definitely need to check out all these products. I'm so excited to tell you about them, and you can learn about them at lancino.com/AAPB. Again, that is Lancino, LANSINOH.com/AAPB. All right, so let's get into Dr. Nicole's notes. So my first one is that, listen, y'all, I know this podcast is great, but it is not enough. As Molly mentioned, you need childbirth education. You need a structured program to help walk you through what to expect in the hospital, especially with labor, with birth, questions to ask, all of those things. And you're not going to get that in week to week podcast episodes that vary by topic. The difference between the podcast and a childbirth education program is that it's a structured content. It's a structured, organized way to take you through and really get you fully prepared for birth. I invite you, if you like the podcast, I invite you to check out the birth preparation course. Because if you like the podcast, you'll like the course. It's much more of me on video, visual elements as well, guides and things to download. So you can check out the birth preparation course at drnicolerankins.com/enroll. But even if you don't like the birth preparation course, I encourage you to find something. You're going to be in so much better shape when you go through a structured childbirth education program. Okay, Dr. Nicole's notes number 2. Nice and supportive ain't the same thing, okay? So Molly said her doctor was nice. She thought they got along. And she thought that she was being supportive when she said, oh, you don't have to worry about something like childbirth education. But that obviously was not the case. Nice and supportive are not the same thing. So do not think that just because you have a nice person in front of you that is your doctor, that is your midwife, that they are always going to look out for your best interests. The reality is that you need to take it upon yourself to educate yourself, ask questions, so you know that your doctor and the hospital are on the side with the things that are important for you and your birth. It's just not enough to know that somebody's nice. It just doesn't cut it. I wish it did, but it doesn't. So you really need to take that structured approach so you find people who are truly supportive of the things that are important to you. And again, that's what childbirth education can do for you. And point number 3 is that you may not know what questions to ask. I want to reiterate that. That's something that Molly said, is that she just really didn't even know what questions to ask. And you may not know what you don't know. Yet another reason why childbirth education is so important. It's going to help you know the important questions to ask so that you are the most informed participant in your care, and you can advocate for the things that are important to you. And your partner can advocate for the things that are important to you too. You really should go through childbirth education ideally together. And the last thing I'll say is that a great labor and delivery nurse can make all the difference. Nurse Jackie made a huge difference for Molly. And I want to say that if you have a nurse who is not supporting you in a way that you think you should be supported, then you can always ask for another nurse. Don't be afraid to pull the charge nurse aside. The charge nurse is the nurse on the shift who's responsible for everyone and is literally in charge. They don't have a patient. They don't have patients that they're taking care of. So ask to speak to the charge nurse, discuss your concerns, and you can ask for a different nurse if you need to. Okay, so there you have it. Couple quick things. Share this with a friend if you like it. Sharing is caring. It helps the show to grow. It helps me to do what I love to do, which is reach as many pregnant folks as possible. So do share this episode with a friend, or the podcast in general with a friend. Also subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast or wherever you're listening to this podcast right now. And I'd love it if you leave a review, and Apple Podcast in particular helps the show to grow. And I love hearing what you have to say about the show. One more thing you can do if you want to get additional information beyond what we do here in the podcast is join my email list. You can go to drnicolerankins.com/email. You'll get my weekly email that contains a helpful tip of information. It contains like a quote to sort of inspire you. And I send like things like discounts and sales through email. I typically don't mention those on the podcast. So being on the email list is the best way to learn about those things. So definitely check that out. drnicolerankins.com/email. I never spam folks. I never sell your information. So you definitely don't have to worry about that. All right, so that's it for this episode. Do come on back next week and remember that you deserve a beautiful pregnancy and birth.